Question of the day. Why do the early 60s, right through the mid 60s, Pearson fiberglass production boats all have wooden Sitka spruce booms? This is a two-part question, I suppose. Why would the builders outfit the early Pearsons with wooden booms in the first place? And why the heck would you keep it if it's the biggest maintenance item on your list every spring? Let's start with the second part first. So I sail Charis with the self-steering Cape Horn wind vane, doing most of the work most of the time. And one of the things that you quickly realize when you sail with a servo pendulum wind vane, or pretty much any type for that matter, is that you've got to learn to sail your boat all over again. The boat has to be balanced. So the roller reefing system on these old wooden booms was the external reefing, where the sail is rolled over the boom via a bronze worm gear drive at the tack and a swivel that the sheet attaches to at the end of the boom. That system allows you to reef the mainsail pretty much to any point you choose. You don't have first, second, third, or for that matter, any reef points on the main. You just take in as many rolls as you think you need, and you balance that with your head sail, and you get the boat to where it needs very little helm in order to stay on course. That's the essence of sailing with a wind vane. And you're able to do that with this system. You're able to essentially create a very delicate balance between your head sail and your main. The secondary minor advantage that I've taken advantage of in the early days when I was sailing with some pretty old and pretty rotten sails is if you do damage your mainsail, I've had batten pocket ends rip, you basically can roll that damage into the sail and keep going. It may be over reefed for a time, but essentially it allows you to unload all of the area around the damage on the sail and keep moving without taking the sail off, without having to do anything complicated in what are generally fairly heavy conditions that cause the damage in the first place. It's also worth noting that this roller reefing system on the boom tends to load the sail evenly from tack to clew. The typical slab reefing system is going to point load the two ends of the sail and leave you essentially with a reefed sail that's loose-footed. This reefing system is problematic with modern sails, but no more so than in-mast or current in-boom reefing systems. Those actually tend to spiral the sail on a much smaller diameter, and they can be pretty hard on a sail. You don't get the sail life out of a mast furled sail that you would get out of a traditionally reefed, slab reefed sail. And there are some interesting solutions that are available when you reef the sail outside of the boom like this. But the biggest problem is sailcloth these days, unlike the old hood cloth in the 60s, just doesn't stretch. So you need a way to open up a gap as you roll the sail down onto the boom and it wants to move back away from the mast. Opens up sort of a wedge between the luff and the mast. And I have created a system that deals with that pretty well. I'll go into that system in greater detail in another posting that shows specifically all of the ways in which I reef my mainsail. But basically the solutions that I've come up with are a pocket along the foot of my mainsail into which I stuff pieces of headsail luff foam and a lacing system that runs up the luff of the sail and connects it to the mast so that as you roll down, you pull cars off the mast and the slack in the lace line is transferred upward. I've also set up a 1/2 inch drill, battery drill with an adapter, so that rather than using the crank handle to rotate the boom, in conditions that allow, I can go forward with a 1/2 inch battery drill and very, very quickly roll the main down to whatever size I want. And then, of course, there's what I like to call the bling value. Maybe a little bit of stolen valor here, but Charis has a way of looking like the older wooden boats because these designs from the 60s were taken directly from the last of the wooden boat designs, the CCA hull shapes. Many of the designers, including Alberg, would have designed wooden boats before they designed these early glass classic plastics. Anyway, you can very often sort of sneak into a harbor filled with beautiful wooden boats and leave the sail cover off and create a little bit of uncertainty when people see this nice, brightly varnished spruce boom as to what the rest of the boat's made out of. Okay, that's a little bit about why after 35 years I still have a varnished Sitka spruce boom on Charis. But let's go back to the initial question. Why was Charis outfitted with a Sitka spruce boom in 1966 when she left the factory in Bristol, Rhode Island? That's where the story gets a little more interesting. So I think I'm in a little bit of a unique position to relate this story because so many of the elements of the story combined in my early life in the naval architecture pursuit and boat building business. And three of those great influences were Barry Carroll at Carroll Marine, where I did my first internship in Bristol, Rhode Island, in the old Kaiser textile mill plant that he was operating from in the mid-'80s. That'll come back around in a minute. And then Pearson Yachts, where I did several internships and had hoped to work full-time after graduation. And Halsey Herreshoff, the nephew of L. Francis Herreshoff and current generation of the great Herreshoff boat building legacy. All three of these influences had a tremendous impact on the course of my career. From the time in 1958 when the Pearson cousins, Everett and Clint, debuted the Pearson Triton, Alberg's first project for them, at the New York Boat Show, they were expanding like crazy. Their business expanded from a garage to a textile mill in Bristol, Rhode Island, very likely the same one where I interned for Barry Carroll in the mid-'80s, to the point where they just needed more space. They were building too many boats for the space they had, and they started looking around, and there were underutilized factories in Bristol, but of course the most desirable ones were those of the Herreshoff Manufacturing Company. These were facilities that were erected to build boats in the first place and had done so for many, many years. There was a legacy there. They were close to the water, and they were essentially perfectly suited to what the Pearsons were looking for expansion. Somewhere around my junior year at Webb, I met Halsey Herreshoff after a lecture that he delivered. And of course, as a young kid who was eager to get into the yacht business after getting his degree, I probably talked his ears off, and really no reason why I thought he would remember me, but as it turns out he did, and just really set my early career on tracks. When I graduated, the yacht business was in a big slump, and simultaneously there was a commercial passenger boat builder that Halsey knew in Warren, Rhode Island, and it was he who reached out and got in touch with me and put me in touch with the Blounts and started my career on its path. So I was always very grateful to him. It was many years later that I was able to thank him for that and to get this story from him. So this is really firsthand from my perspective, I guess secondhand from yours. But it's a pretty touching story about how things used to be done. So in the early 60s, Clint and Everett Pearson, with their eyes set on the old Herreshoff manufacturing facilities, or at least some of the buildings, went to see Halsey's uncle, Al Francis, and asked him to lease or rent or sell them space where they could expand the blossoming entity that would be known as Pearson Yachts. And L. Francis thought about it, and he said that they could make an arrangement, but that there were some special stipulations. As it turns out, he had a few of his guys who weren't quite ready to retire yet, and basically told the Pearsons that they could have the space, but the space came with some skilled workers. This was a little bit of a dilemma because the skilled workers were skilled in wood, and the Pearsons had no real intention other than a bit of wood trim, maybe some interior joiner work that could utilize the skills of these guys, more so because these skilled workers were spar makers. And so it was that the Pearsons, in order to get the space they wanted and make the deal with the Herreshoff family, essentially had to come up with a way to use wooden spars on the early Pearsons. And so the spar makers were put to work building dozens upon dozens and probably hundreds upon hundreds of Sitka spruce solid round booms. And all of those old Pearsons that you see with the round varnished spruce boom, if they still have it, are carrying the last vestige of the Herreshoff manufacturing skilled trades that was essentially carried over into the fiberglass boat world. And that's why you see a wooden boom on a fiberglass boat.